Welcome to No Password Required, a monthly conversation that introduces you to some of the top talent in the world of cybersecurity.
Hello and welcome to No Password Required, a podcast dedicated to exploring the minds and personalities that make up the field of cybersecurity. I'm your host, Ernie Ferraresso, and with me, as always, is Jack Clabby, the cybersecurity attorney at Carlton Fields, PA in Tampa. And back with us is our friend Pablo Torres, a senior cloud security engineer at Second Watch. On the podcast today, we will chat with Chase Fopiano, a former police officer who has a passion for learning. As the founder of CyberTech Analytics, Chase combines his knowledge of law enforcement and information security to provide his clients with a wide variety of cybersecurity services. During his downtime, Chase enjoys spending time with his growing family and reading books. Lots and lots of books. Chase, we look forward to a great conversation, but first, hello to my co-hosts, Jack and Pablo.
Hey, Ernie. I'm doing fantastic today. You probably saw this. I think we all saw this, but big news for the podcast. FeedSpot, which is a well-known news aggregator, just listed No Password Required on its list of the top 50 cyber podcasts. Big deal. This is a global list. We are number 23 out of 50 from FeedSpot. We are the Michael Jordan's jersey number of cyber podcasts, number 23. So I think what FeedSpot did was they looked at traffic, social media following, domain authority, and freshness. We didn't get a lot of look at what freshness means, but I know, to me, it feels like, when Fresh Prince of Bel-Air takes that fancy...
It's the smell, it's an aroma.
Well, no, it's that prep school jacket, and he turned it inside out, and he puts the paisley on display. So to me, that's freshness, which we try to rock everywhere. So in any event, thank you to our listeners. They're awesome. They're engaging with us on social media. They're subscribing to us. They're making sure that they get the freshest cybersecurity news out there. Number 23... and the number one cyber podcast in Florida, I believe.
Number one.
I love the other ones. A couple of West Coast podcasts up there. But I think of West Coast as being, 1990s cyber news. I think as us as
that's right.
Being at least mid-2000s.
Dude, we're on the vanguard here. We're out front. We're out front.
Ernie, how do I combat this as an intro? I mean, not to interject, but Jack, man, the attorney in you came out so fresh. We're talking about a crisp $2 bill right now. I like that, man.
Attorneys like rank. It's evidence I can point to of how great the podcast is. I love it. One thing we should talk about at least a little bit, because linking 1990s to today, again, is the FBI earlier, mid-January, the FBI put out an alert about these poisoned USB devices. So we're back with that again. That's it.
Hey, listen, coming around. That's right.
Yeah, it's an oldie but a goodie, and it works. These ransomware gangs are mailing out malicious USB drives that have malicious codes. They're sending them to critical infrastructure, transportation, insurance, some military and defense industries. But these packages arrive, and they're made up to look like COVID or pandemic related care or some sort of package related to that. Or it looks like it comes from one of the major online retailers. And so, people think when they see HHS markings on a box, I can open this thing. They open it, there's a USB drive in there. What do? Do they resist the urge, or do they put it into the computer and therefore immediately trigger all the bad stuff that these ransomware actors are doing? So the criminal, the bad guys behind this are Fin7. I think they used to be known as Carbonac, the Navigator Group, and they've been around for 7 or 8 years now. But this is just it's hilarious until it hits you, and it's tragic. But it's one of these things where, the idea of sending a good-looking person into a building with a couple of CD-ROMs and leave them on the break room table and see what happens. So there's an FBI alert on it. I saw the article in Threat Post and figured it was something we should talk about. But again, not the first time. This is an oldie but a goodie.
No, this is a classic.
Yeah.
This is a classic. First off, I have to tell you, you mentioned some good-looking person. I'm trying to picture what a good-looking USB stick or drive looks like. I mean, I got one around here that's, I don't know if I'd call it good looking, but yeah, that's a classic. I mean, that's the one of the a real easy one is if you were to go back in, they probably still do it, right? Yeah, you go to any of the quote big arms conventions. I know, Jack, you were big on going to the big arms show out in the Middle East.
My brand has always been linked with Middle East arms shows. I agree.
Yeah, and that was one of the, you could always tell was the great, you always wondered why certain arms manufacturers that would particularly come out of, I don't know, some places in Central Asia or such, would hand out USB sticks as their conference swag. So that's, that's sure to be a, and another one. So you mentioned oldies but a goodie. So we can travel, let's put on our Marty and Doc Brown hat and travel back in time. I'm going to start singing Huey Lewis, by the way. I'm on a Huey Lewis kick lately. Gotta get back in time. Anyway, we're going to travel back to 1996, back to the good old days. The Department of Defense did it's funny, they did a security exercise. And one of the things that they did was they either they mailed or they sent or they delivered CD-ROMs that had all the cool service logos on them. And it was supposedly a free pick your service screensaver. And so they gave them to all these service members who then promptly, didn't identify themselves as anybody from the government. It was just like some free screensaver loaded up here. And as we know, in the old days of a good old Trojan horse, that was they promptly went in, and did they not just put it on the unclassified system, but yes, they loaded it up, and they had the halls of Montezuma and the shores of Tripoli bouncing across their screens on the classified, and behind that screen was ET phoning home to the to gain access. So yeah, this is not nothing new under the sun, but people fall for the same ones. I mean, things like that are part of the reason why on the classified they disabled all the USB ports.
Yeah,
because people were doing that. So, yeah,
but if people, some folks rely on it still. But I mean, endpoint management, Pablo, is that going to get most of this stuff?
Gentlemen, so I was thinking about this, and I was considering everything that you guys are sharing. And I have to say, if I had to circle back to 1996 and then round it all up and circle back to now and think about the AARs, the after action reports that are being disseminated for this type of work, it should just say curiosity killed the cat.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I dislike what's happening right now with Fin7. Fin7, if you're listening to this, I mean, we have a pretty vast audience. That vast audience themselves is going to be properly educated on this podcast. We're not going to insert any sort of USBs that we're not familiar with into our devices. And then
strong down here in Florida.
No. We're strong in Cyber Florida. We were just talking about how resources are being allocated from the antiquated versions of California with their tech startups all the way to Florida. So here, I mean, we have major companies that are relocating to Florida, not just only for the financial incentives, but also because of the growth and the potential and opportunity. And then let's just throw in the beaches there for a plus. But yeah, I think this USB stuff is nothing more than just these groups having run through all of their playbooks and having to go and circle back to 1996.
I tell you, it's endpoint protection, it's education, and then I think another thing to think about is for every anonymous USB drive that gets surrendered to the information security folks, you should get a voucher for a free cafeteria meal at the business.
That's a good idea. That's a good
free
idea.
Free cup of coffee.
Yeah. But we're virtual now, so it's a voucher for the online store for online swag. Yeah. Just mail it in. I mean, or I would love nothing more than to educate our user base, or let's say our end users who we monitor, or our clients, depending on what type of ecosystem you handle.
That's the stupid thing.
VDIs. If you can deploy a VDI, here's a week off work.
But I think too, it's I don't think the FBI alert specified whether it was going to the office or the home. I have to believe these were office payloads, but probably keep an eye out for things like that at home too, because I imagine that there is some sensitive material that's being sent. Yeah. These materials, according to the FBI, right, were coming through the United States Postal Service and through UPS, which is okay. If you can mask your IP address and you can be anonymous and you can lob in your bad activity, go ahead and do it. But if you start using USPS and UPS, I mean, there's a return address. There's a credit
Yes.
card associated with that file. I mean, so I did have nothing in the reporting on this that I've seen has indicated that they're making arrests. But like, that's an awesome starting point. Is just, okay, we have to, if we know that this at some point went into the USPS system, we can probably figure out where it came from. So pretty cool. But that was so about the good looking thing, Ernie. I mean, when I have heard about these other types of compromises, and these were popular in Wall Street maybe 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
It was a good-looking human being who would walk in
Yep.
and would find their way in and just leave a couple things,
Just leave them there, or stop by. Hi, I'm such and such. Feel free to take a.
Yeah.
As listen, some of what's old is new.
I love it.
Right? And I got to tell you, there's no free lunch. There's no free lunches out there. Nobody, especially in cyber. There's nothing. There's no freebies. There's always something. Whether they're going to take your money, they're going to take your data, they're going to take your identity and use it. Whether you quote consent or not. No free lunch.
If I could circle back quickly, I did take a brief leave from the podcast, and I am very excited to be back. I'm excited for what season 3 has to share. It's quoted as randomness, but this really is a very family-oriented podcast, and what we're going to deliver for this season is going to be spectacular, especially with our first guest. So I'm excited for him to be queued up.
Well, Pablo, we're glad that you're back. And so we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we'll get right to our guest. We're going to talk to Chase about his life in the cybersecurity world and how his previous career in law enforcement taught him life lessons that he still uses today.
Looking for more no password required content? Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at No Password Pod.
Okay, welcome back. Our guest today is Chase Fopiano, a cybersecurity professional who believes that caring is the best way to stand out from the competition. I think you might be right. Chase, welcome to No Password Required.
Hi, Ernie. Thanks for having me.
That's an interesting statement. You said caring is important. What does it mean, beyond what you would think it means?
So I think a lot of it stems from being in law enforcement. I think if you get into it for the right reasons, that's the main reason you should have, caring about people. So as I transitioned from law enforcement to cybersecurity, I wanted to take that with me because in all my years of being in the road as a police officer, when you took that little extra effort to show the person you're dealing with that you truly do care about the outcome and the best way you could possibly help them, it makes the difference in their life. And I think in cybersecurity or any industry, you're building long-term partnerships with people. You shouldn't be in it just for like a quick sale, like, hey, I just want to sell you antivirus and move on and never talk to you again. Cybersecurity is changing every day. It's getting significantly worse each year. And if you're not out there caring for your clients and building those long-term partnerships, don't know why you're in it.
Yeah.
Chase, just to walk the audience through, how you got where you are. Can you just help us understand sort of what got you into law enforcement, and then maybe trace us through your career path through to opening up CyberTech Analytics?
So I always wanted to be in business. My friends joke with me like, oh, I never would have thought you would have ever been a cop, which I don't know if I should take that offensive or not, but
Yeah, not sure how to tell. Really?
yeah, I think they're coming from a good place because even at 12 years old, people would be like, oh, that's when people said they wanted to be a fireman or policeman. But I was in the background like, hey, what do you want to be? Oh, the CEO of General Motors. So it's kind of.
Is this post bailout or after or before bailout?
That was pre.
Something to do with
pre bailout. So that's when they were doing well and people wanted to be the CEO of General Motors.
Well, what was that? You're 12 years old. I want to pick up the thread, but when you're 12 years old, what is it about that job at General Motors that was exciting to you?
So just honestly, I loved cars, and I probably loved General Motors cars at the time the most. But I also loved business from a very early age. It was one of my passions. I probably kind of grew up too quickly because I loved business and had those goals and aspirations that early on. Kind of rushed through high school, wanted to get into college as quick as I could and get into the career workforce as quick as I could. So I think I wanted to lead people and I wanted to make a difference in any way I could. And I just had like a crazy ambition and drive that like I always wanted to do something that challenged me and find out the next new thing in life, learn something new, teach someone else what I learned. And it does come back to I love GM cars at the time. So that's why I picked GM.
Did you go undergrad for a technical degree, or how did that path?
No, so even though I wanted to do that, I ended up, when I was going to college, I went to Florida State. And
Yeah, you'll notice nobody commented.
yeah, I was going to say,
We let that one slide.
I was going to say go Knowles, but I didn't want to do any self-promotions here. So when I went to school, I still had that business ambition, but what actually changed kind of the course of my life is senior year of high school, I did an internship at the public defender's office. And I really enjoyed that. It was like the best internship in the world because my best friend's mom was like number 2 in charge of the public defender's office. So I actually didn't have to do anything an intern normally does, which was great. So I kind of just went around and like watched trials and met judges, attorneys, and I happened to meet police officers as well. So that was my first just kind of observation of what law enforcement was. And I kind of took an interest at that time. So when I went to college, I started doing ride-alongs with the deputies, police officers for Tallahassee Police Department. And I probably did a little too many. I remember once I rode with the county deputy for like, they worked 12-hour shifts. And I finished one 12-hour shift and I was like, hey, do you think I could ride with day shift another 12 hours? He's like, I guess.
Yeah.
So I get with a day shift officer and I'm like falling asleep in his car. And he's like, are you here for school or like mandatory to be here? I was like, no, I just really like it.
This is my community service.
So I did that. And after doing a couple ride-alongs, I just kind of fell in love with it. And I saw like the difference you can make in the community, whether it's the community you grow up in or anywhere in the world. And I ended up getting my undergrad in criminology. And I worked for the campus police department while I was up there at school. And then I graduated early, once again, rushing onto the next thing. And then I got hired back at home, and the rest is history. But moving into cybersecurity happened very randomly. So most of my career, I was a trainer on the road. I trained new police officers, put them basically in the capacity of going solo on their own. But I ended up getting a position in IT, which kind of did like IT projects and just like the liaison to the police officers and the civilians. Randomly, a couple months later, our IT director left the city and he was in charge of IT security. And I worked with him on a daily basis and did a lot of the stuff that he did on the sworn side. So I randomly got asked like, hey, will you take over our IT security? And
it's amazing.
Being the ambitious person I like to think I am, I was like, sure.
Yeah, why not?
The only background I had at that time is I got my master's degree in security management, which on the management side of it, I had a good understanding of what I needed to do. But on the technical side of cybersecurity, very little knowledge. So I'm huge into like self-learning. I believe in education. I believe colleges are out there to provide you a great thing that you should definitely go after in life. But I think self-education is even more important because learning things that you're not familiar with or like finance, I self-taught everything I know about finance, and cybersecurity, I self-taught a lot of stuff, but luckily I had a lot of good resources to teach me a lot. But I literally went out and I took probably 80 or 90 courses over the period of like a couple, 1 or 2 years, whether it was through Department of Homeland Security, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, any program I could find, MIT cybersecurity program. It's a little expensive, but it's a really good program they offer for managers. And just anything I could to give me that understanding, because I'm dealing with people in IT as an officer, and I wanted to kind of be able to like talk to them about the issues we faced in security. So I made sure to make it a point to go out and learn as much as I could about it.
So you accepted the job and you're now the IT head for the city.
The law enforcement side of it.
For the law enforcement side of it, yeah, that's pretty incredible. So, all right, so how does it, the first couple of days of that job, how does it go?
Luckily, nothing happened. I'm sure maybe if we had like a massive ransomware in the first couple of days, it would have changed my career trajectory. But luckily, I was able to work with the team and kind of see. Our last manager was a great guy, and he had basically set me up for success. So I'm very thankful to him for that and for giving me the opportunity. I would have never had that opportunity otherwise, especially being on the law enforcement side. Usually I don't get to fill those type of roles. But I think because of my education, the experience I had, I was involved in all our technology projects. That kind of gave me the backdrop to have the confidence of my superiors in filling the role. But that kind of led me to see that people needed help out there, companies, even governments, because people are lacking budgetary funds and resources, and they're lacking the people. I know the cybersecurity field has so many open positions, but so little people to fill them. And I see people joking all the time on social media about, hey, there's a junior entry-level cybersecurity job open. You just need 30 years of experience, a PhD, and a CISSP and CISM certifications that require 5 years experience. So
it's funny you mentioned that, because that's we're laughing, but that's like, you're not that far from reality. You don't know how many times you come across must have 5 years of experience in a technology that's only been around for 2 years.
Yeah.
How do we deal with that? How do we bridge that gap?
I think the responsibility is on employers and leaders in those organizations to be realistic with themselves. When I started CyberTech Analytics, or really any company I've started, just like I didn't have experience in that, but I was able to grow that and learn what I needed to learn, I gave people opportunities in like, for example, our sales division, or just getting familiar with antivirus or SIMs and the different technologies out there. I gave people chances that didn't have like a huge cybersecurity background. They might have gone to a cybersecurity boot camp or had an undergrad degree in computer science, but maybe not the technical side of cybersecurity. But you have to give people chances. That's how they grow into the person they're meant to be. And that's how you become successful as a company. And I think the companies out there that are trying to get that perfect cybersecurity position on paper, they're losing out on a lot of people that can grow into a wonderful cybersecurity professional. And I don't ever want to do that. I think if someone has good IT experience, or maybe help desk or networking, like that's probably a great foundation to move over into cybersecurity. And I think that's what I would look for now, is some kind of, like, you don't have to be in cybersecurity, but maybe you had an IT role, maybe you were on a help desk, or just a technical lead, or you worked on IT projects. Because I think a lot of people, if they put in the effort and the time, you can learn what's required to be professional. And what you need to know in cybersecurity is a lot of it's hands-on. Like, I could teach you a lot in school. Like, I love to teach. I still teach to this day, but until you do it in person, like hands-on, especially with like if you're on a SOC team or you're monitoring something, like you have to see that stuff up close in person. It's like when I took over that position, we used Darktrace, and that was the first time I ever looked at like a intrusion detection system. But hey, what does this mean? That's the power of Google. What does this mean? What does that mean? How do I run a PowerShell? So I think companies, like I said, are doing a disservice to themselves and their clients if they are in that industry, of not giving more people a chance. Because it's just, you can't have an entry-level job that needs that much experience. It's just impossible. That's why we have the shortage that we do. And especially people in that field with experience make good money. And what they're starting these positions at are like shameful in a way. Like, you're not going to get someone that wants to do that, and especially if you're not willing to give someone the chance.
So Chase, what made you leave the department, and what did you do when you left?
So I'm still sworn. You try to keep up your certification just because I think that's a great background. And I still do a lot of work for government agencies or cities and police departments specifically. So getting back to starting it is I saw that need for personnel and professionals or people with that experience. And I think the combination of what I had with seeing cybercrime, network intrusion investigations I got to touch digital forensic stuff, got to go to a lot of like Secret Service, National Computer Forensics Institute classes. So the combination of those, I was like, wow, I think I could provide people a service, especially smaller companies that can't go out and hire someone and pay them $150,000 a year with benefits, insurance, company car. And with my experience of the law enforcement side of it and seeing what the criminals are doing out there, and still seeing it because I still get that opportunity, and then the management side of it and the risk side of it, I was like, why not do it? I'm like, I have to try this. I've done companies in the past that I had very little passion for, and I'm like, cybersecurity is like, I live and breathe it. Like my wife joked with me a couple months ago. I was reading a book called Solving Cyber Risk, and I read very dry material.
I was gonna say that sounds riveting.
Yes, she thought so as well. But it's just, I knew that with my experience and my drive that I could maybe put something out there to companies, especially not Fortune 500 companies, the small 25 to 250 range that needs a chief information security officer or needs a security expert, because nowadays technology runs businesses, but they don't have the funds. And no one deserves to be in that position and get hit with some kind of attack because they didn't know how to prepare themselves. And then the business is no longer there. So,
Chase, this was something where Cyber Florida was involved with the Florida Sheriff's Association's annual meeting a couple of weeks ago. And this was the theme that came out from the sheriff's associations across the state of Florida. And I'm sure in every other state across the country is, we know what we have to do, but for smaller offices, we don't know how to do it. We can define the problem. We literally just don't have enough money, to protect what we know we have to protect. And so I hear what you're saying about needing a solution for this. The problem is it hits everyone equally, but somebody without a budget, maybe they have 2 IT people, nobody with a specific security in their name. It's a very difficult to solve problem.
And well, Chase, you're a living example of it. It's for law enforcement agencies. All right, hey, we need an IT guy. Fopiano, what are you doing? I was just going to listen. Get over here, and I need you to configure my router. What? I'm sorry. Yeah,
he likes video games, right?
That's
That's
right,
the same
exactly.
thing. Put him on.
yeah, that was like that was the hardest part. Like when I was a police officer, people thought I was like, oh, the guy's like tough guy.
Yeah,
tough
that's
guy.
right.
And I switched over, and now everyone calls me a computer nerd. And I'm like, what's going on? I used to be a tough guy, now a computer nerd.
Well, I will tell you this. That's changing because we're going to get to a point here in the not too distant future. This is, Federeso's prediction for I don't know what year we're going to put it on. I don't want to limit myself. But you're going to start seeing that the tough guys are going to be the ones that are in the field, but also can deal with the cyber side of it, and maybe even more so on the cyber. So. Yeah, you mentioned something that I think is interesting. We got real quick. You are a true. You're a pioneer. You're a leader in this field. You mentioned dry reading material of books. You've got a really unique style. If you had to pick a character, like a movie character or a book character or something, that what that guy represents, or guy or gal represents, who is that?
So, if you guys don't know, I'm a very big Star Wars fan. Star Wars and the Green Bay Packers, 2 of my big fan.
I think they're very closely related, because if you look at the cheese head, it's actually like a Star Destroyer.
Exactly, it just has a lot more holes in it.
That's right. Well, it depends on when that Star Destroyer is.
That's true.
Anyway,
so I kind of relate my personality and who I am to Yoda, not Baby Yoda.
Not baby.
Not Baby Yoda.
Well, as we know, Baby Yoda is not actually Baby Yoda.
Yes,
it's
Grogu.
a Baby Yoda, not
There you
Baby
go.
Yoda. A big difference.
So yeah, the full-grown, couple 100-year-old Yoda is who I relate to,
That's right.
and it's, and I think it just comes down to. I think I've watched Star Wars so many times. You like look super deep into it, or just look. You see and know the characters so well. You think of like you start thinking of them as like how you could relate maybe. But Yoda is the most calm Star Wars character. But I think it comes down to I've always been, even in law enforcement and incident response now with clients or anything, I am always calm. Like you could, people I used to work with, like whether I was in a car chase, chasing someone on foot, doing something crazy where most people would be screaming, I would still be talking in this tone, being the calm, normal self I am on every other call.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've been able to do it over the years, but I really just focus on that calming presence in life. And I think it just makes you perform better under pressure. And the second thing I relate to Yoda is I think in the entire Star Wars universe, he's a true leader, someone who he leads by example. He's not out there being that rah-rah leader, like just all you hear him is talking. And I think a true leader is someone who does their job well and does it showing an example to other people. And they may not talk a lot. They may listen more than they talk. I think in life that's a good thing. I think too many managers or leaders talk more than they listen, and we need to do more listening nowadays.
And I always think he could have retired from the council decades before he did. And he didn't. He stuck around for the bad stuff. And you know, he wasn't just looking for the cushy retirement. He stayed all.
Well, they probably had a 300-year pension on the council.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, but if you think he did retire to a small plot of land in the woods. I'd like.
Obviously it wasn't that great of a pension.
Yeah. Well, it's a public servant, right?
It's true.
Yeah, you're not going to get rich in that field.
They had that weird cave, and you couldn't even put a vehicle anywhere near
That's
your
right.
house.
With no parking, no garage. Really?
Yep.
I mean, come on.
We just say, he says the Dagobah system, but then he shows up and he finds the exact spot on the Dagobah.
Boy, that's right.
The
Yeah.
whole system?
He felt it.
That's right. That's got to be it. Well, what just from what you're reading too, I was fascinated by. It sounds like you read nonfiction. You read things related to work. Do you read fiction too? Or how much? What's your balance between nonfiction and fiction, Chase?
I would say 80% nonfiction, 20% fiction. Most of my nonfiction is kind of all over the place. Leadership, mindset, growth as a person, cybersecurity, solving cyber risk. To me, I love this stuff. Other people may find the books boring or not even be able to get through them. But I think the content, and that happens to me too. I'll read a book and I'll read the first chapter and be like, there's no way I'm getting through this. So that happens, I think, to everyone. But on the fiction side of it, I kind of stick to two, either the old school Star Wars books,
Nice.
and then Dan Brown, the author of Da Vinci Code series.
Was there a book that you'd recommend for somebody who's new to cybersecurity leadership or wants to be in cybersecurity leadership, that can help them?
So when it comes to that, I don't think it's necessarily like truly focused on cybersecurity leadership. I think a leader in any field, one of the books I would recommend is Wooden on leadership. It's John Wooden, the old school basketball coach. I think for any person in any industry or organization, like he was the perfect example of just someone who went out, did the hard work. One of the quotes was like, you'd see John Wooden like sweeping his own gym floor after he won multiple championships. And I think he just kind of emulates like the perfect lead by example manager, coach, executive, whatever position you're in, because he didn't have to do that. He had so much success. He could have, I'm going to sit here on the sidelines and just accumulate. But he was, I think, obsessed with hard work and being a leader and truly caring for his people and wanting the team to succeed. and caring for them. And just, I think that's the true part of being a leader is when I was a trainer in law enforcement, and there's nothing better than seeing the people you trained and the people that were under you, or even that you helped them in some way, be successful or do something in their life that maybe you had an impact in getting them there.
And the folks who had Coach Wooden as a teacher, as a basketball player, and if you were to ask them even years later, who's the person, they all say
Yep.
Coach Wooden. I mean, they all keep it with them. It's like the universal around them. It's fantastic. Well, I think there's a lot that we can learn from that book. So we're going to take a short break now, Chase, and when we return, we're going to have Ernie's lifestyle polygraph. So please stay with us, everybody.
You're listening to the No Password Required podcast. We cover cybersecurity and a lot of other stuff.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Chase, are you ready for the lifestyle polygraph?
I hope it's not as serious as the other polygraphs I've taken, but I'm ready.
So, yeah, now this, it's far more serious because typically a lifestyle polygraph is something used by the federal government to determine someone's suitability for access to highly sensitive and classified information. However, we here at No Password Required use it to determine people's affability and their, how do we know really who you are? And so that said, we're going to start off with the first question. Here it is, the first question. Really, this is going to be a tough one. I've been advised, for those of you in the audience, the following question and response may elicit an emotional response. So if you are prone to emotional outbreaks, you may want to skip to the next question. Here we go. First question. What's the moment in your professional life that makes you most proud?
So I think when people think of, and I have to relate to law enforcement over cybersecurity on this one, just because over the years, I think I was able to help a lot of people, or at least assist in making people's lives better. But I don't remember like the chasing people on foot or the 500 arrests or the stressful moments. I always go back to this moment where I was working with a partner and I went to back them up, and they were talking to a guy on the side of the road who was panhandling. And she was, I would say, being mean to the person. Like, I didn't appreciate the way she was talking to him. So I kind of tried to step in and say, hey, I'll take care of this. And I think not even in law enforcement in general, we don't stop to ask where people came from or maybe what they're going through in life. And I wanted to make sure, and I always try to do this, but this particular person in general, I wanted to make sure I asked him that because it was just a unique situation. So I kind of just started talking to him and seeing where he came from, why was he out there? Because he had a sign that kind of was talking about his family and he just needed food for his family. And once I got into the story, it turned out that he had lived in the area, and it was back in the housing crisis in Florida, and I'm sure it affected people nationwide, but he had gone into foreclosure, he lost his job, and he was married, and him and his wife just had a baby. And he was they were living on the front porch of his foreclosed house, and he was at that intersection every day panhandling just to buy his family and his infant food and formula and diapers. And when you hear that kind of stuff, it kind of hits you hard, in knowing that, like, oh wow, I was just dealing with this guy as like he was just out here panhandling, he was just breaking the law. And I think you have to, with everyone in every situation you encounter, think about that other person. And after I heard that, I was like, whoa, like, I thought some days I have bad days or I've gone through some bad stuff, but this guy lost everything, and his family is like on the verge of like possibly collapse because he's here every day just trying to collect food and formula and diapers for his brand new baby. And I've tried to do this a lot in my career since that moment, but it was where he was like at the intersection of, it was right by a Winn-Dixie. And I said, hey, listen, come with me over here. We went into the Winn-Dixie. I literally got a shopping cart. We went down every aisle, got him diapers, formula, food, water, and like every aisle. He's like, "Oh, you sure?" I'm like, "Get whatever you need." And I'm like, "Please." I'm like, "This." I'm like, "I will hope I have never experienced this. Hopefully I never do, but you need this and you deserve this. And if this helps you propel yourself, maybe to feed your family another week, then it's my honor to do so." And that was the person I remember. He was like so thankful. And that's why I think I still remember this to today over everything else in my career. And when I dropped him off, he said, "Sir, I'll always remember this. And I'll always remember it too." So I think that's just, I'm glad I was able to do that for someone. And after that, I kind of tried to be that kind of person a little more each day. It is about those moments, being a leader in whatever career you are. It's about creating those moments that people remember. And I think that's how you live a good life.
Oh, I got to tell you, that's, you got two things that scratch. First, it's, walk a mile in the other person's moccasins. And then, don't just talk the talk and walk the walk. And that's such a profound example of doing the right thing. And that's, when you say that's something you're most proud of, well, for what it's worth, man, you should you should be proud of that. That's I'm humbled that that you shared that with us, and that you actually you still agreed to be on our show because of all that. But
No, I'm glad. Anytime I'm glad. I like to, because I think when people like see the news sometimes, or I think in law enforcement, you don't get to express the happy moments. We usually go to like, or even that, it was like the worst moment of that guy's life that I was interacting with him. But you just got to make it a little better, or show the other person you're human as well.
I think we could all do a little better finding little bits of humanity in amongst ourselves these days. Yeah. All right. So, speaking of walking a mile in another person's moccasins, here we are. The next one. If you were building the perfect car chase, you're the one doing the chase. What car are you driving, and what are you chasing?
Ooh.
So you got to pick you're designing the perfect car chase. Yeah.
So this might be a little different than most people would answer. Most people, I think, would pick like the fastest car out there. I think if I was chasing any vehicle, would be the most awesome car chase would be me chasing a military tank, like on 95.
Yes.
And then not in like any, I don't need a ultra fast car. What I need
no, you don't.
I need range and distance. So I would go with a Toyota Camry Hybrid Sport Edition.
That would be fantastic. And I want to say that where was that? Was that out in California or somewhere where some guy broke into the National Guard Armory, was driving the tank down the streets? And
yes.
So it's not without precedent, man.
It's definitely happened
you can still live that dream.
Yes. And then the Camry has like 800-mile range, so never outrunning me. It's not like he's going 190 miles an hour.
And you sure as hell ain't going to have to try to. You're not going to. Nobody's trying to run him off the road.
And it's sensible maintenance costs afterwards. Yeah. Just reasonable to take care of it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Good for the environment.
It's a win all around.
It offsets all the consumption that the tank is doing.
Yes.
To be able to save.
Yeah, well, and
like it goes back to the good balance in life.
Yeah, balanced as everything should be.
Yes.
A tank like that, that probably runs with its engine running. You're probably talking maybe hour.
Yeah, it's not
tops. They don't. They measure fuel consumption in not miles per gallon, but gallons per mile. So Do
you try to? All right. So for something like that, do you try to if you know all that information, Chase, as a professional, do you try to get them to run out of gas, or do you try to initiate something to stop the tank?
I don't think there's anything out there that could stop it. You'd have to get like
you're gonna deploy your spike strip.
Yeah, you'd have to get like one of the huge SWAT trucks and like just drive in front of it sideways, but it's still probably ramming out of the way. I think it's It's about endurance and outlasting the fuel economy.
And hope he doesn't go through any buildings.
Yeah, it's not like any vehicle you can like do a pit maneuver on him. So you're just hoping he runs out of gas and you got him then.
If this chase were on I-4, you could just stop. When they hit the Disney traffic, everything would just stop. But if you're on 95,
exactly.
95, it would be. That's why you put it on 95,
Yes.
so you get a chance to run a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah, open her up. Yeah. All right. Okay. Here we go. Oh, this is another tough question. This one may almost similar to the first one may elicit an emotional response because it's a pretty polarizing topic. What's the greatest gaming console and game combination?
I would say I do have a history of I grew up playing video games. So my final answer is Nintendo 64 GoldenEye.
Yeah, I mean, that's the objective correct answer to this question, Chase.
Thank
there
you.
is a right answer.
I was not fed any, for the audience, I was not fed any answers before that question.
You can take, and I've done this, because I have a GoldenEye N64 that somewhat still functions, and I have played it with today's youth. I've played it with 10-year-old kids, and they agree. They're like, they don't get it at first. Then you show them the 4v4, you show them the 2v2, where you walk them through a level, and they're like, yes, because it's everything you want in a first-person shooter, but it's all the extra stuff you don't. There's no overcomplicated stuff. There's no stat building. And level design is so good. Yes.
And I think the big thing is you get to be next to the person that you might have been dominating.
Yes.
So your trash talk is in real life. Unlike nowadays, you can say whatever you want because you know the person is
And
like
nobody's-
in some other state.
Nobody's going to sit there and pop you right
Exactly.
in the side of the arm.
It's a true party game. That's it. And you don't get, there's some games on the Switch now, like you'll see kids playing in a group in person, some of those games, like Mario Party maybe, or Smash Brothers, where you can play in person together, but nothing is the same thing. And there's no chat, right? There's no, keyboard chat where you're insulting each other. It's you got to insult the person to their face in addition to what you're doing on the screen.
Like you said, it could be dangerous because the person's next to you. It could be dangerous nowadays because if you see in the news sometimes that some people get overly angry and call in like the SWAT team to your house.
Yeah, they swat you.
Swatting you.
Yeah.
So it could still be dangerous.
It's just
Yeah.
awful. Yeah. Oh.
Be careful if you're out there trash talking people on video games.
I got that whole swatting thing along that lines. I would have thought that we would have better. Is this a real crime or is this or is it just? Well, anyway, that's a whole other subject. A little too lofty, a little too weighty because the next one. Here we come. This is our next question. Who is your favorite Star Wars character, and why do they appeal to you? And it can't be Yoda.
So it wasn't Yoda.
Okay, good.
I still think Yoda is the greatest leader in the Star Wars galaxy.
Yeah.
People probably would have questioned me if I said this guy was the best leader. My favorite Star Wars character, though, is Grand Admiral Thrawn,
Yes.
who is more present in the Star Wars books than he is in the movies. Even though,
Grand Admiral Thrawn?
yes, he is one of the
All right,
highest
listen.
ranking admirals in the Imperial forces.
In the Imperial, I'm assuming in the Imperial Navy, right?
Yes. So
Okay.
I kind of became, I wouldn't say obsessed, healthily obsessed with him after reading. He's in actually a lot of older Star Wars books, and then Timothy, I forgot his last name, but there's a new author that writes a series of books about him. And like after reading those, like I'm very similar to him in other ways. I wouldn't say he's the best leader because in the Imperial leadership is a little
their
different.
style tends to be a little bit,
A little aggressive
directive.
style of leadership.
Yeah.
But after reading the books, he
Apology accepted.
he is just the ultimate example of just having a strategy and covering your basis in everything. And I actually take that into life and even cybersecurity or preparing clients. Like you have to literally think of every single thing out there, every single situation, problem, outcome, and have a plan for it. He is definitely my favorite Star Wars character, especially you don't get to see him in the movies a lot. I think at the end of season 3 of The Mandalorian, they kind of show a brief picture of him.
Yeah.
So he might make an appearance. But
there were questions about the canon status because they undid the canon of the Timothy Zahn books, and then
Timothy Zahn, there you go.
And then but then he does make an appearance in one of the Mandalorians, I believe, and so I think and it's unclear if it's going to be the same Thrawn or not.
Yeah. He's big in the animated series too. They had him in like some of the Disney animated Star Wars stuff.
For our final questions, here it is. If the human version of Jar Jar Binks approached you and asked you for advice on being a better person, what would you tell him? What would you tell Jar Jar Binks to be a better person?
So we've already talked about enough stuff of how to be a good person. So Jar Jar Binks is very polarizing and not the biggest fan of him. I would tell him that there was some great real estate available in the system called Dagobah.
Lovely.
Beautiful real estate, massive population of similar creatures, and he can talk away forever being on Dagobah.
Someplace
that's the nice answer.
I got someplace I think you'd really like.
Yes.
I think there's a great place.
And now that no one is there anymore, you'll have a blast. Plenty of stuff to eat for him. So yeah, that's me being the nicest person possible towards
cheap
Jar
land.
Jar Binks.
Yeah.
Some people you just need to. They're not going to get better or worse. You put a box around them. Just put a box around them.
I'm sure he'd enjoy it though, and yeah, like you said, cheap real estate. That's hard to find nowadays.
Yeah. I mean that the whole Jar Jar Binks character. I mean, I don't know what. There's probably been something out there. What was does anybody know? Why we have a Jar Jar Binks?
My understanding is it was to appeal to young children, give them an access point to the universe. But then it became race. It was like it's a racist caricature, it's been viewed that way. You kind of like there are a lot of other ways you could have given an access point to young children.
What about R2D2?
Correct.
I mean, come on! It's a little.
There's your access
thing
point
that
right
beeps
there.
and even Yoda.
Droids are
Yoda
great
has
characters in the Star Wars.
Yeah.
universe.
Yeah. You had pod racing. You had the really cute mechanics droids that fix the pods. There was a lot for young children in episode 1 that you didn't need Jar Jar, but I think that's what I read where it came from. So, well, that's the right answer. It's a very politic answer, Chase. Just remove him from the situation, it solves all the problems, and he gets something out of it too. Yeah, he gets all he wants.
We have to wrap this up, and I got to tell you, we've learned quite a bit. I think your polygraph results will confirm that in fact you were telling us the truth about your entire life in the previous segment. What a remarkable insight. I think we covered a lot of ground again, as we tend to do. We've traveled across the galaxy, in addition to cyberspace, we travel across the cosmos. So Chase, please thank you very much again for joining us. It's been truly a wonderful experience. And if our listeners want to connect with you, how can they do that?
So I'm on LinkedIn. If you just type in my name, it's probably the easiest. I don't LinkedIn. I seem a little more professional. If you want to know me a little better, I would say I discovered Twitter recently, and I'm super into Twitter and just giving little tidbits of information about life, mindset, leadership, cybersecurity, investing, but not investment advice.
Yeah, again, I think Jack's going to say so. Yeah.
I like
not
it.
investment advice, but little tips, crypto, all that stuff, cybercrime backgrounds. So Twitter is probably a better place to find me, at my virtual CISO, CISO. So definitely try to push some good content and information around there. And then if you need a little more background on CyberTech Analytics, it's basically www.cybertechanalytics.com. We try to push good educational stuff out there because I find education and prevention of a lot of these things in cybersecurity out there are key. Because if you ever ask anyone that investigates ransomware, the first question you should ask them is, how many people have you ever arrested for ransomware? And that will give you the mindset of you need to do as much as you can prevention-wise, education-wise.
Well, that's fantastic, and we'll make sure that we send our folks your way to check that out. So coming up next, Pablo Torres is back. He's back with a new segment, Technologue, so stick around.
All good things must come to an end, but we're not there yet. Welcome to the Technologue with Pablo Torres.
Okay, welcome back. And now it's time for our new segment, Technologue and Pablo Torres.
Thank you, Ernie. Allow me to paint the picture. Have you ever heard or ever used of a vending machine and ordered food where you've been fortunate enough to get an additional item dispensed from the machine at the same time? Lucky day, right? Sure. However, now imagine that same vending machine, that same order, and this time a string running from your sole item to all other items in the vending machine, giving you the proverbial crown jewels to the kingdom, or simply more food. Well, this is kind of like what we're seeing with Log4j. Log4j is a very popular logging library for Java. According to Java, 3 billion devices run Java. So a critical vulnerability in there is pretty bad. And that's what all members of the information security field at large received on Christmas of 2021. Simply said, it's not a very good surprise. There's plenty of resources online with a lot of promising researchers covering this topic. Here, we're just going to skim the surface. Have you guys ever heard about this?
Yeah, I think you read a lot of headlines about it. I've talked to a couple of clients about it. But I have to say, so beyond the surface level, Pablo, I don't understand it. I don't understand the technical aspects of it, other than I understand it involves Java. Maybe we can talk a bit. I mean, how has this thing been successful? How, like, I know there were some headlines on it, but has it been successful?
Great question. It's been pretty successful, and it's definitely been the number one cause for many sleepless nights for many security teams. This isn't something that you can just push a patch out for and expect the fraud to be solved. I mean, there's a lot of downstream impact, and to say that, hey, introducing a bug fix for a bug isn't going to implement another potential vector for another bug, to be the case is the reality, because there's always potential for something worse to happen when you roll out an update. And this is especially true when tasked with the responsibility of redeploying 10,000 AWS instances, which is not a trivial task.
Is this something where there's going to be an end to it? Or is this the kind of thing where Pandora's box is opened and there's going to be, we will be chasing this thing for years?
No, we're not going to see an end to this. And yes, Pandora's box has been opened. We got to keep in mind that from this experience, a lot of nefarious actors are going to be looking through every open and closed source library to identify additional exploitable vectors that could potentially present other zero-day remote code execution exploits.
This is like the Windows 95 unpatched servers in the basement that we sometimes encounter. You're going to always have a vulnerability that folks will forget to check off their list when they're decommissioning. So one of the phrases that I've heard folks use is Jndi. It's an acronym that I was not familiar with at the beginning of this, but I've learned a little bit about. Maybe you can you kind of walk us through what a Jndi is?
Yeah. So it's a little complex because it's part of the way that Java references information and how it decodes these objects using the naming manager. But a JNDI is a Java naming directory interface. It's a common interface and interacts with the naming and directory services. Those are two completely different things. One's a naming for naming services, and one is for directory services. A naming service is an entity that associates the names and values known as bindings, and it provides the facility to find an object based on the name that is known and associated with the lookup. And then a directory service is a special type of naming service that allows storing and the finding of directory objects. A directory object differs from the generic objects in that it's possible to associate the attributes to the object. In other words, a directory service offers extended functionality to operate the object attributes. This is where you queue in LDAP. because that is a potential vector of exploitation with this log4j vulnerability. And with the LDAP vector, it can be used to store Java objects using several different special Java attributes. And via the 3 different ways, specifically Jndi, we're decoding these objects using the naming manager, which allows for the remote code execution to happen. So when that call is made, if you were to have some sort of code execution, when you try to reference the Jndi, it's going to deploy whatever program is associated with the execution.
All right, so like when I'm playing an 80s video game and I get the skeleton key and I apply it to all doors, I think this is great for me, but why did they have a skeleton key in the first place? When I think about this log4j issue, like why does this library we're talking about have these functions in it if it makes it so pervasive for bad actors?
The short answer and the simple answer is convenience. The original developers of log4j wanted to provide a solution to the logging and the data parsing that's required when operating public-facing servers and APIs. And then due to the integration of the LDAP, it allowed for crafted strings to be referenced and in the logs and the servers to find pivot points to exploit this data with that key that you're mentioning, the skeleton key. It's pervasive because it finds itself everywhere and anywhere that uses Java, and convenience was the primary reason why log4j itself has become so pervasive.
How do you resolve this? What's the resolution to the problem? You have a mid-sized company, this is going to be an issue for you. What is the resolution?
Yeah, that's a heavy question. I mean, due to the pervasiveness, as we've said, just with the skeleton key itself, all code has to be checked on Linux, Macs, Windows, and resolving this is going to require defense in depth. I recommend using activities such as focusing on outbound LDAP traffic from your internet connections to destinations that you're not familiar with, and then deploying rules to block exploit traffic from internet-facing services that are associated with the signatures that are made available for log4j. Long-term protection, it requires updating these instances and then making the updates via the Apache updates to make sure that all components and services are working as expected. Yeah, and if we simply had to say something as a member of our audience, you have to remember to take cybersecurity as a priority. We have to earn security. We have to fight for it every single day. If you do that, you'll be one step closer to navigating the depths of the cyber abyss.
How do you think our listeners should approach this with their cybersecurity team? How do you think they should, connect with them on this particular vulnerability?
I think just mentioning the name log4j would be equivalent to just mentioning Voldemort's name if we were talking Harry Potter here today.
So this is the vulnerability that shall not be named, at least at the beginning of 2022.
Yeah, this is that vulnerability. This is the one that a lot of people are concerned about because there's so many dependencies that are built off of Java, that are using Java, that have some sort of Java in it, and you never really know if you've turned all the rocks properly to find out whether or not you have log4j enabled. The best way to connect with your team, ask them if we're vulnerable for log4j. Have we gone ahead and updated to the new Apache standards on all components using the services? And if not, what can we do about it?
Well, so, with all that said, given this is a new segment, I think we're going to implement a new scale of rating system here, based on what you described, Pablo. 1 Pablo being this is okay. 5 Pablos means this is the end of the world. Where are we on the Pablo scale with log4j?
I'd have to put us at a solid 4 Pablos. This requires 24/7 operations.
So we're coming out to shoot with the Pablo scale with a 4, category 4 Pablo vulnerabilities here. This is no joke, so pay attention out there.
Yeah, we got a big one on our hands. But yeah, guys, log4j, I'm happy you guys heard about it. And for our audience, hopefully we can learn something and expand the conversation with our tech teams.
All right. Well, that was Pablo Torres and Jack Clabby talking about Log4j. And as we got into this, welcome to the new Pablo scale and 4 Pablos for Log4j. That brings us to the end of today's program, and thank you very much for joining us. First and foremost, I have to say thank you to my co-hosts, Mr. Jack Clabby and Pablo Torres. And also thank you to our guest, Chase Fopiano. Chase is a guy who really represents what Master Yoda said. Do not try, there is only do. Or something like that. But either way, Yoda does it better, and Chase lives it up in spades. So that said, remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the No Password Required podcast. And you can find us on social media at No Password Pod, and send your questions or comments to info@nopasswordpodcast.com. And if you share your info, we'll send you some show swag. Again, I'm Ernie Ferraresso, and thank you for listening, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you for listening to the No Password Required podcast. The show is produced by Cyber Florida. A special thanks goes out to our friends at Carlton Fields and Second Watch. If you would like to learn more about the show, visit our website at cyberflorida.org/pod. And if you still need more show content, check out our social media at No Password Pod.